So this question is looking at analysing a graph, and there's actually two graphs in the question. We'll come on to the second one in a moment. So the initial information tells us it's about slimming foods and about carbohydrases, which are an enzyme. So iodine solution is pale gold brown transparent solution, and starch reacts with iodine to form a dark blue mixture. So I'm just going to highlight that because the graph is about that sentence there. And also it mentions that iodine is transparent, but it doesn't say that about starch, and that's key to answering this next part of the question. So on the graph I've got percentage of light passing through the mixture, so high amount of light passing through to a low amount of light passing through, and percentage concentration of starch increasing. So because I know that starch is not transparent, that must mean that with increasing concentration of starch, it must be getting cloudier. Okay. So in the question it says explain why less light passes through the mixture, here you can see it decreasing, when the starch is more concentrated. So the answer is simply because starch is less transparent. Okay, so when the concentration of starch reaches 2%. Now on this graph, it doesn't look like it's linked at all to the question. So what I need to do is to go back to my first graph and look at the concentration of starch reaching 2%. Because that's the only graph that refers to that. So if I bring my first graph back in, there's the percentage concentration of starch. So I find 2%, and I'm going to draw up to the line, okay, and then across, okay, and I can see that that value is 40. Okay, now it asks me to say how I'm working out my answer. So the first part of this, I'm going to just put 2% of starch equals 40% of light. So that's information I've gained from the first graph. So now I can use the information from the first graph and use it on my second graph. So this time I want to get my 40% of light, which is here, and I'm going to read across again, this time the opposite way around to the x-axis. So there's my 40. I'm going across to the first line, the line marked A, because it says the most effective one, so that will be the one with the steepest curve. And then I'm going to go down to my x-axis here. Now sometimes in the exam it's a little bit tricky to read off of the graph paper, but there is a tolerance in the mark scheme. So I'm going to say that is 7. So 40% of light equals 7 minutes. So I'm using one graph to answer another. And in the last part of the question it says explain why the manufacturer carried out the investigation at 40 degrees. So there's that 40 degrees again, which they referred to in the earlier part of the question. Now when they say explain, it means that I need to use some of my scientific knowledge in answering the question linked to the graph. So the first thing is we're talking about a slimming food, which is going to be used for humans. And we know that our body temperature is very close to 40 degrees. So my first point is going to be that 40 degrees C is similar to body temperature, which means that my results will be valid. And then secondly, I know that as enzymes get put at higher temperatures, actually it's not on this graph, but it is as part of your scientific knowledge, they are denatured, so they're not going to be used at higher temperatures because they would break down. So enzymes are denatured at higher temperatures. That's my 2 points for 2 marks.